Six and a half, 6, 6, 6, 6. Indruk. Six and a half, 7 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7. Kirsten. Seven, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 7. Seven, 7, 7, 7, 7 and a half. Julie.
Five now, 6, 6, 6, 6. Julie.
7 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 7. Vivian.
Six, 5 now, 6, 5 now, 5. Selina.
7, 8, 7 and a half, 6 and a half, 7. No.
5, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Mike. 4 and a half, 5, 5, 5, 5 and a half. Logan.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 7. Emma.
6, 6, 6, 7, 6. Two.
5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Michelle.
6 and a half, 6, 6, 5 and a half, 6 and a half. Michelle.
5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 6, 5. Laila.
6 and a half, 6, 6, 7, 7. Morgan.
5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 6 and a half. Lina.
6, 6, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5. Amanda.
5 and a half, 4 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 5. Melissa.
5 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 4 and a half, 4 and a half. Silly.
6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 6. Madeline.
6 and a half, 6, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Emmy.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 7 and a half, 7.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 6. Orby. 6 and a half,
7 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Madeline. 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 4, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half.
Take it.
Lynn. 5 and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half, 6. Katsiena.
7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 6. Rising.
5 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 7, 7. Ah.
6, 6, 6, 7, 6. Now. 2. Daughter.
8, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half. Silver. 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half,
6,
4.
5 and a half.
Nikki.
Mike.
7, 6, 6 and a half, 7, 7 and a half.
2, 2 and a half, 2 and a half, 3, 2 and a half. Good job.
5, 4 and a half, 4, 5 and a half, 5. Camilla.
7, 7, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 6. Money.
5 6.5, 6,
6,
7,
5,
6.5,
5 and a half,
7.
6 and a half, 5 and a half. Daniel.
Leon.
Five, 4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half. Sophie.
6, 5, 5.5, 5, 6. Good.
Four and a half, 5, 5, 5, 5 and a half.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Sorry. Round 2, first diver, Annemarijn.
Five and a half, 4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5. Thank you.
Six and a half, 6, 6, 7, 6 and a half.
5 and a half, 6. Sophie.
Lara.
Four and a half, 4, 4, 4, 4. Alvos.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 6.5, 7. Kimberly. Six, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.
6, 6, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Last diver, round 1, Ellen.
Five and a half, 5,
6,
6,
6 and a
5.
half. Round 2, Cynthia.
Daniel. Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Maurice.
Five and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half, 5. Amadi.
Four and a half, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Ellen.
Five, 6, 5, 5 and a half, 5. Elma.
Six and a half, 7, 7, 7, 7. Alba.
Six, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Regina.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Inlet.
Six and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half. You.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 5, 7. Kirsten.
Four, 4.5, 3.5, 3.5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7. Welcome.
All judges, 4 and a half.
5.5, 5.5,
Mike.
6.5, 5, 6.5. Julia.
Five, 4.5, 5, 5,
7,
4.5.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Julia. Seven and a half, 6.5, 7.5, 7.
Good.
No.
Six, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5. Michelle.
Fail dive.
Seven, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. Mogdani.
Emma.
Six and a half, 7, 5.5, 6. Amama.
Two, 3, 3.5, 4.5, 2.5. Michelle.
Five, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Selina.
Six, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
7, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Emmy.
Six and a half, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Yeah.
Six, 6, 6, 5, 6.5. Mike.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Melissa.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Svetlana.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Madeline.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5. Zeitje.
8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 7.
Rosa.
Razzie. 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Georgia.
8, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Mali.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Mike.
3.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 3.5. Lynn.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Julia.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. That's it.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5. Maggie.
'All judges 7. Mom.
6, 4, 4.5. Daniel.
7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Silver. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Making.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4. Answer 2. 6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Ready?
6, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Andrea.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Change.
Camilla.
5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. So good.
5, 5, 6, 5, 6. Leon.
5 down. Almost.
6, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Build.
Almost.
7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7. Starting round 3, first dive.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 5. 11.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Line.
8, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 6.5. Round 3, Sylvia.
6.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7. Kimberly.
6.5, 6.5, 5, 6, 5.5. Aman.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 7. Anki. 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Daniel. Six and a half, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Regina. Four and a half, 4,
5.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Ellen.
Four and a half, 4, 5, 6. Regina.
Alba.
Four and a half,
6.5, 6, 6, 7, 6.5.
Mike.
England. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7.5.
5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.
Yes.
Logo.
Six, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.
Duffy.
Good.
Eight and a half, 8, 7.5, 8, 8. Julia.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Michelle.
Seven, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 6.5. Vivian.
All judges 6. Mocha. Six and a half, 6.5, 7. Amanda.
7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7. Nora.
Four and a half, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Swing.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Emma.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5. Emmy.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Michelle.
6.5, 6.5,
4,
6, 6, 6.
3.5, 4.5, 4.5.
Mike.
Lila.
3.5,
7, 7,
3.5,
6.5, 6.5, 7.5.
7.5.
Lina.
7.5, 7, 7, 7.5, 7. Thank you.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5.
6, 6, 6.5, 5, 5.5.
Melissa.
That's easy.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 4.
5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5.
Madeline.
Georgia. 6.5, 6, 6, 5, 5.5. Mike.
7, 7.5, 7, 7, 7. Rosa.
3, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4. Julia.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7. Ali.
7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Money.
4.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Lee.
4, 4.5, 4.5. Daniel.
Six and a half, 6. Katsiarina. Seven and a half, 7. Round.
4.5, 4.5. Ann-Sofie.
Eight, 7 and a half, 7 and a half. Silver.
5, 4.5, 5, 6, 5.5. Premier.
5 and a half, 5. Nikki.
4.5, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5. Thank you. Seven, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Sophie.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6. Andrea.
4, 5, 4.5, 5. Alma.
4 and a half, 5, 3 and a half, 4 and a half. Camilla. 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 6 and a half.
Last time around 3, Evan.
Leon. 6, 5 and a half, 6, 5 and a half.
7, 8, 7.
Good.
Round 4. Round 4, Sydney.
7 and a half, 7. Starting on round 4, first diver, Anne.
6, 5.5, 5.5. Amanda.
5 and a half, 6 and a half. Line.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Elton.
6 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 7.5. Kimberly.
Six and a half. Regina.
5, 5, 6.5, 5, 5.5. Anki.
Five and a half, 4.5, 5,
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Daniel.
Four and a half. Serena.
6, 6, 5, 6, 5.5. Marlies.
Four and a half, 4.5, 5.5. Mike.
4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. Ellen.
Five, 4.5.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Alba.
Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 6.5,
5.5, 6, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Finley. Six and a half, 6, 6, 5,
7 and a half, 7 and a half. Michelle.
Yes.
Four and a half,
5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5. Delphi.
Six and a half,
7, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Julia. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5, 3.5.
Celine.
Vivian.
6.5,
5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 4.5,
and
6.5. North. Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6.5.
4, 3.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4.
Emma.
Mike.
Six and a half, 6.
5.5, 5.5,
Michelle.
5, 4.5, 5. Svetlana.
Four and a half, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.
6.5, 7,
Right.
6.5, 7, 7. We will change our judges in a few moments, so be prepared for penalty. Saitja.
All judges 6.5. Lina.
Six and a half, 6. Razi.
Five, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Melissa.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5. John.
4, 3.5, 4, 4, 4. Madeline.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Mike. 5,
7, 6.5.
Hugo.
Rosa. 7, 6.5, 8, 7, 7.
6.5. Muddy.
Mali. 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5. Lynn.
4, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Daniel. Four, 4.5, 4.5.
6.5, 6.5. Tatiana.
Four, 4, 3.5, 4.5. Ready?
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Right. Seven, 7.5, 6.5, 7, 7.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.
7.
Five now, 5, 5 now, 5 now.
5, 5, 4.5, 5, 5. Biggie.
Four, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Almost.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Andrea.
Five, 4, 5. Last time around 4,
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Come here. Six, 5, 6.5, 5.5.
6, 6.5, 6.5.
Leon.
What the last time around 4, we're going to change the panel. Panel being prepared. Take your places. Seat number 1, Tatjana Jakashevich. Seat number 2, Anik Music. Seat number 3, Arigo. Seat number 4, Oivind Nijboom. Seat number 5, also Grand Prix, Sofia Kelly.
All judges 4. Good. Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 7. Starting round 5, first diver, Almijn. 6, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.
5, 5, 10.
Klaar. Seven, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Kimberly.
6.5, 6, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5. Come on.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.
6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6. Emma.
5.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Daniel.
4.5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Veel dive.
Regina.
Marlies.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6. You.
5.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Ellen.
6.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Regina.
5, 5, 5.
5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Thank you. 5, 4.5, 5.5, 3.5, 4.5. Laura. 5.5, 5, 6, 5, 5. Cody. 5,
4.5, 3, 4, 4.5. Lovely.
Five and a half, 4.5. Michelle.
All judges 7. Julia.
Five and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 7. One.
5.5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Vivian. Seven and a half, 8, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Nora.
Three and a half, 2.5, 4, 4, 1. Then
5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Emma. Four and a half, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Emmy.
Five and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Lila.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Nine.
6, 6, 4.5, 6, 5.5. Lina.
5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Get back.
4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Melissa.
6.5, 5.5, 6, 7, 7. Saya.
4, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4. Madeline.
7, 6, 6, 7. Berhasil.
7, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 7.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.
Rosa.
Roger. Five and a half, five and a half, five and a half.
Five and a half, 6.5, 5.5, 5. Honey.
Four and a half, four and a half, 3.5, 4. Julia.
2.5, 2, 2, 3, 2.5. Lynn.
Six and a half, 5.5, 6.5. Nine.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Please prepare for change. Judge panel B, Sala Kijkman, Ballis Liegert, André Monodov, Kim Jensen en Dirk Thijs. Next diver, Katsiarina.
Four and a half, four and a half, four and a half, 4, 4.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Ma. Seven, 6.5, 6, 7, 7. Silver. Four, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.
4, 4, 4, 4 and a
Nikki.
half, 3 and a half. Anna-Sophie.
Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 6.
Andrea.
Emily. Three and a half, 4, 4, 4.
4, 4, 3.5, 4, 4.5. Camilla.
Five and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Sophie.
5.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Leon. 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 6.
Alma.
Bill.
Five and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Ella.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Change to judge panel B, chair 1, Sala Kekman, chair 2, Balas Liekhardt, chair 3, André Mamadov, chair 4, Kim Jensen, and chair 5, Dirk Thijs.
Six and a half, 6, 6, 7 and a half, 6 and a half. Round 6, Celia. Four and a half, 2, 2 and a half, 1, 2. Amaya.
Okay, starting round 6, first diver, Amaya. Five and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 6 and a half. Lara.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 5, 5 and a half. Emma.
6 and a half, 6, 6, 6, 6 and a half. Kimberly.
Five and a half, 5 and a half, 4 and a half, 5. Regina.
6, 5 and a half, 6, 6, 6. Anki. 4 and a half, 4, 4, 3 and a half, 4.
4, 4, 4, 4 and a half, 4 and a half. Jules.
2, 2 and a half, 2, 2, 2 and a half. Maris.
4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 4, 4. Selena. 6, 5 and a half,
4 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half.
Michael.
Ellen.
5 Low.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Alba.
Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 6. 30.
3.5, 5, 4, 3.5, 4. Inlet.
Four and a half, 3, 4. Michelle.
1 moment for a technical problem.
Three and a half, 3, 1.5, 2. Morgan.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Yes.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 7. Amanda.
3, 4.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. Duck.
5 for all judges. Divina.
7.5, 7, 7, 7, 7.5. Julia.
6, 6.5, 6.5. Amy.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Vivian. 6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.
5, 6, 5.5, 6.
North.
Maya. 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Giovanna.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 4.5. 4.5, 4.5, 3.5, 5, 4. Michelle. Four and a half, 3.5, 4. Lila.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. 14.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Lina. 3.5, 4.
Georgia.
Melissa. 3, 3, 3, 2, 3.
4.5, 3.5, 4.5, 3.5, 3. Michael. 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4. Julia.
8, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Rosa.
4.5, 4, 4, 4, 3.5. Harry.
7, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Marlene.
5.5, 4.5, 5, 4, 4. Danielle.
3.5, 3, 3, 3, 3. Lynn.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Up to feet.
3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 3.5. Katsiarina.
4, 4, 4, 3.5, 4.5. Christine.
4.5, 6, 6, 5, 4.5. Mama.
Don't use your flash. Thank you. Don't flash when you're taking pictures.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.5. 2.
5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. 2 feet. 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. How much?
2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Nicky.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Heaven.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Andrea.
6.5, 5.5, 6, 7, 7. Round 7, Cindy.
4, 4.5, 4, 5, 5. Camilla. 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5.
5, 5.
Liam.
Amaya. 5, 5, 5, 4, 4. Emma.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 6.5. Last side, plan 6. Do. 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Starting round 7, first diver, Amaya.
5, 5, 6, 5.5, 6. Two.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Lana.
4, 4.5, 4, 4, 3.5.
6, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Kimberly.
Five, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Thank you.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 7. Anki.
Four and a half, 4.5, 5, 4.5. No.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Daniel.
Five and a half, 5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Go.
2.5, 3.5, 3.5, 2.5, 4. Marlies.
Three and a half, 2.5, 3.5, 2.5, 2. Michelle.
All judges, 4. Ellen.
Five and a half, 6, 4.5, 6. Morgan.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6. Alba.
Six and a half, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Amanda.
2.5, 3, 3, 2.5, 3. Indra.
Four and a half, 4, 3.5,
6,
4,
6.5,
3.5.
6, 6.
Tina.
Kirsten. Two and a half, 4, 3.5, 3, 3.
Six and a half, 6, 5.5, 5, 6. Amy.
Seven, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. Julia.
Three, 2.5, 3.5, 2, 1.5.
5-5-5-5-4. Vivian.
4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Shanghai.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Door.
5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Fire.
4-4, 3.5, 3, 3.5. Emma.
5.5, 6, 4.5, 5, 5. Rapid.
4.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Michelle. 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Leila.
5, 5, 6. Georgia.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Lina.
4, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.
5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Melissa.
4, 3, 4, 3.5, 2.5. Julia.
2, 3, 3.5, 2, 3. Mandy.
5.5, 6, 5, 5.5, 6. Barry.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Rosa. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Marine.
Five, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5. Daniel.
2, 3, 2.5, 3, 4. Lynn. Five and a half, 6, 5, 5.5. Katsiarina. Five and a half, 6.5, 5, 5. Maha.
Five and a half, 5.5, 4.5, 2.5, 5.
Six, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6. Silver.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4, 3. Jamaica.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Vicky.
4.5, 4, 5.5. Sorry, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Jacob.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Andrea.
2, 2, 3.5, 2, 1.5. Sophie.
3, 3, 3, 3, 4.5. Camilla.
5, 6, 5.5, 7, 5. Alva.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4. Leon.
4, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.5. Ella.
4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. 2.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Round 8, senior.
Six and a half, 6. Starting round 8, first diver, André.
3.5, 4, 4, 4, 3. Amanda.
Six, 5.5, 5. Lara.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Emma.
All judges, 6.5. Kimberly.
5.5, Lady.
5.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5.5. Ankie. 3.5, 4, 3.5, 3.5, 4.5.
4, 5, 5, 4.5.
Daniel.
2.
5.5, 3.5, 4, 3, 4.
Selena.
Marlies.
4.5, 4, 5, 4.5, 4. Tiger.
1, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 2. Ellen.
4, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Laura.
5, 4.5, 5, 4, 4.5. Alba.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. 40. 5.5,
5.5, 4, 5, 5, 5. England.
6, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5. Michelle.
5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Yes, Steve.
6.5, 6, 6, 7, 5. Long out.
5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 6. Duffy.
6.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 7.5. Amanda.
7, 7, 7, 7, 7.5. Julia.
5. Davina.
3, 3, 4, 3.5, 3.5. Vivian. 5.5, 5.5, 7, 6, 6.5. No.
4.5, 3, 4, 4.5. 80.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5. Emma. 4.5, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.5.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5. Maya.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4,
5,
4.
5.5, 6, 5, 5.
Lila.
Linda.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5.
Lina.
Sai.
4.5, 5.5, 5. Melissa.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Brazil.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Madeline.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. 5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Rosa.
4, 5, 5, 4, 4. Julia.
5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5.
6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5.
Malie. 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Lynn.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4.5. Danielle. 4, 4, 4, 4, 3.5. Anne-Sophie.
1, 2, 2.5, 2, 2. That's it.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Enrique.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Nah.
3, 3, 4, 3, 4. Jenny.
7, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 6. Sylvie.
5, 5, 4.5, 4, 4. Sophie.
2.5, 1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. Nikki.
3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Alma.
3.5, 4, 4.5, 3.5, 3.5. Andrea.
6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Helen.
4, 3, 3, 3, 4. Camilla.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 5. This was the last dive in this competition. Thank you, judges. Thank you, secretary.
Two and a half,